If you were watching the New York Mets play on Wednesday night, you saw a collective sapping of energy from 30,000 some odd people in a ballpark. Not even sure what the attendance was, and millions of Mets fans as Max Scherzer pulled himself from a start. We now know it is because of a left side injury. We don't have much more than that. I will discuss that injury, what it means for the Mets. Also, recap a game where the Mets offense finally scored 11 runs. And to close out the show today, it's about time that Luis Guillorme gets his own segment. Going to cover all of that on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor, and where I also host the Thursday edition of the State of the Division podcast with RM Layton, where we recap everything going on in the National League East. A fun episode that is dropping today as we talk a little bit about a Wilson Contreras potential trade to the Mets, as well as everything else going on in this division with the Phillies, the Mets, the Nationals, the Braves, and the Marlins. Now let's talk, though, about the huge news of the day. Max Scherzer getting hurt. He ends up pulling himself in the sixth inning. Prior to that, Scherzer looked like he was laboring, and he did say after the game that he was pitching with a little bit of tightness in his side, but nothing that was abnormal. He has pitched through things like that in the past, but he felt a zing in that left side, which you don't want to speculate. He did throw out intercostal oblique, but he was trying to kind of dance around it in the post game as well. He's hoping that he caught it early and that it's not anything significant. And once he felt that zing, as he said, he knew he wasn't going to push it. But it's a moment where the entire fan base was collectively holding their breaths, and still we were all waiting to find out what happens when he goes in an MRI tube, because who knows what could be revealed. It could be, a grade 3 oblique strain, and you could be thinking about a future where Max Scherzer is not with the Mets for a pretty significant period of time. Hopefully, and he tried to downplay a little bit. I think that there is still a pretty decent chance that this ends up turning into something where maybe he has a 15-day IL stint and you miss him for 2 weeks, just to be cautious on this. And you just have to get by for a little bit, and then hopefully he can get back into the swing of things. But, you kind of look at what happened in this game, and it's really unfortunate because, once again, Scherzer was showing what he can do. He, in the second inning, has the misfortune of Eduardo Escobar making an error, so there was one unearned run there. He gets an out, but then gives up 3 consecutive hits that score the 2 runs. And other than that, he really didn't give up much of anything. 7 hits allowed, no walks, 4 strikeouts. Did give up a couple of hits in that 6th inning, which is why it was so shocking when he pulled himself, because a lot of times you would think a Scherzer would maybe try to pitch through some injuries if it was not too significant to try to get out of that jam. But as he said, when he felt that zing in his left side, he just was not going to risk it, and he knows his body better than anyone, and that gives you a little bit more confidence that this won't be serious. And when it comes to the result of the game, Adam Ottavino was able to strand those runners for him, and because the Mets were able to score 9 runs over the final 5 innings, Scherzer gets his 5th win of the season, which actually moves him into the MLB lead, tied with Logan Webb, Justin Verlander, and Walker Buehler. That was also his 195th win of his career, so he's also knocking on the door of 200. So a lot on the line for Scherzer this season. You expect him to be the workhorse carrying this team. We've talked at length about him being the ultimate Jacob deGrom insurance. Right now, deGrom still on the IL. I don't expect him back until, July at the earliest. In particular, I don't expect him back until the other side of the All-Star break. So you're already dealing with that injury. You already have Tyler McGill to hit the IL. with the bicep tendonitis, if I'm not mistaken. I know it was a bicep injury. I think that was what it was specifically called. And so now you're waiting for the inflammation going down on him, and then him trying to get back into the swing of things. And so what that leaves you with right now, assuming that there is at least a 15-day IL stint for Scherzer, you'd be looking at a rotation of Chris Bassett, Carlos Carrasco, Taijuan Walker. David Peterson was already going to get slotted back into the rotation in place of a McGill, but now Trevor Williams, who made a spot start in McGill's place, will likely remain in the rotation. And so then it becomes, again, Bassett, Carrasco, Walker, Peterson, and Williams. And if you're thinking about your depth chart going into the season, I mean, Taijuan Walker was supposed to be your fifth starter. Now he's bumped up to your third. Williams was supposed to be a swingman. Now he'd be your fifth starter. Peterson was, the second guy behind McGill when you headed into spring training as far as your rotation depth chart goes. Now he'd be slotted in as your fourth starter. Obviously, everything got shuffled originally when DeGrom went down, but you had McGill in there. So it was both Peterson and Williams on the outside looking in, and they have contributed and pitched well in limited roles, but now you push them to the forefront and you wonder how they can hold up. So hopefully, I mean, if everything breaks, great. Max Scherzer avoids an IL stint, and can make his next start. I mean, that would be the dream scenario where he wastes it tomorrow and feels completely fine. I don't imagine that's the case. I imagine that really your best case scenario is that it's a low grade strain. He goes on the injured list. It's a 15-day IL stint now. So that puts him out for 2 weeks. He misses, maybe 3 turns in the rotation and could maybe get back into the mix without a rehab stint after that period where he can maybe throw some sides at the end of that IL stint and just get right back on the horse. But if he does go on the IL, I mean, now you're at this point where all of your depth will have been condensed into the starting rotation, and that means you're one injury away from a problem. And really, having Trevor Williams in the rotation already creates a little bit of a problem because he's been trusted to be your long man. So, what do you do to fill that role, even? I mean, we've seen Adonis. Oh man, someone corrected me today on the pronunciation, and I'm gonna butcher it again. I'm sorry, Medina. Hope I got that one right. Apologies. But Adonis has been very good this year. I can see him kind of slotting into that Williams role, and maybe you can roll from there. But beyond that, the only two names on the 40 to look at is Jose Budo, who's in double A and pitching very well. 3.18 ERA, 39 strikeouts, and 28 in the third, a 1.09 whip. Budo is the one option that intrigues me where I think, all right, he could maybe be the guy that's this year's version of what Tyler McGill was last year, where someone gets called into action and surprises you for a month. But I think the Mets, want to really not screw up his development. I mean, he's in double A for a reason. I don't know if they'll go straight to Budo. I would imagine that if there had to be another starter called on, if for whatever reason they want to keep Williams in that swingman role and they decide to go another direction, I could maybe think they would lean Zabucky. Um, but I saw him in person and I know his numbers are pretty good. And he's actually had some good starts since that one start that I saw him on, which I think was May 3rd. Yeah, he has a 3 ERA flat on the year, which is good. 29 strikeouts in 21 innings. That's good. But you look at his whip of 1.38. When I saw his stuff, to me, I just think that he's a guy as a left-handed pitcher that I don't see it. I'll be honest, and I could be wrong. I hope I am wrong. Here's a prospect that has dealt with so many injuries and has just sort of been on the periphery for a really long time. And it'd be great to see him get his opportunity to thrive in. And we're obviously rooting for everyone who puts on a Mets uniform to do well. But from what I saw, I don't know. I saw a pitcher that got really frustrated at times in that AAA start that I watched. When strike calls weren't going his way, it seemed to really get in his head. I almost got some Steven Matz vibes from it. And someone that's going to walk a lot of batters, maybe give up a lot of hits. I just don't know. I think that if you're calling for as a Pucky over a Trevor Williams, I think you're getting a little bit too swayed by some AAA numbers. I think Trevor Williams is clearly the answer right now. He's already stretched out to 65 pitches. You get him into a regular rotation where he doesn't have to worry about maybe pitching out of the pen at all. and I think he can be up to 80 pitches in no time. And I think he's the type of pitcher almost similar to a Joey Lucchesi last year, where I think you can get him through a lineup 2 times through. And Peterson's kind of similar as well in that way, where you don't want to press it too much, but I think they can go out, they can eat some innings for you. They can throw strikes, hopefully, and you just have to trust this offense to do a little bit more, and that's where you're at here. So hopefully Max Scherzer's injury proves to be not too significant, and it's kind of a race right now to see who will be back first, McGill, Scherzer, or on the outside chance DeGrom. And if it is DeGrom that's back first, that means that Scherzer has a significant injury, and that means that McGill is probably experiencing a setback at some point. So we'll see what happens with these injuries. This is why you have depth, though, and I'll tell you, um, there's other teams that wouldn't have a Trevor Williams, and I'll tell you something else. Trevor Williams is better than a Jared Eichhoff, who we saw last year in a similar type of role. So we'll see what happens. Nothing else that we can really discuss right now until we find out the results of that MRI, but we can discuss what helped Scherzer get that fifth win of the season, which was an outstanding performance by this Mets offense. But imagine if you were to dip your finger into a plastic tub of birthday cake frosting, but then you open your eyes and you realize you're actually eating a protein bar that only has 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. It's actually healthy for you. That's the experience you will get if you eat one of the new birthday cake puffs from Built. I just received my own package of birthday cake puffs, and I'll tell you, they did not disappoint. It really does taste like you're eating a birthday cake. But you're not dealing with all of those extra calories and sugar and fat, and they're available right now. And we can promise that if you go to built.com, you will not be disappointed if it's either the birthday cake puffs or the churro or the banana cream pie. These are protein infused marshmallows that come covered in 100% real chocolate. They really are absolutely delicious. You can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. And they're made with a collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. So if you want to try the birthday cake puffs today, go to built.com and use the promo code LOCK15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. So one fun stat I like the most from today's game, with runners in scoring position tonight, the Mets were 7 for 15. When did that happen last year? I could dig through the numbers and I'm sure there was a game. But considering what we watched last season, I also would not be surprised at all if they never got 7 hits with runners in scoring position, much less in 15 opportunities. I would have taken 45 opportunities for that team last year to get 7 hits with runners in scoring position. So a great team victory again. One of the things that I've done throughout this season when we're breaking down these games, I talked about how every single hitter in the lineup contributes. And in this one, everybody got a hit but Eduardo Escobar, and he had a sacrifice fly. So a top to bottom performance. The Mets got the scoring going in the first inning. Once again, as always, Brandon Nimmo getting on base early. He drew a walk. Mark Canha got a hit inserted into the 2 hole in the lineup, a position I imagine he might keep. I think Buck Showalter found something he likes. I don't think that they're going to push Lindor um, out of that early place in the lineup batting third. I think that they still trust him to break out of this funk. So if you're going to go with somebody else in the 2 hole right now, I like it because that allows Jeff McNeil to provide Pete Alonso with some insurance behind him where they can actually pitch to Pete. I will say that if I was making a lineup and if you were to knock Lindor down to go 1, 2, 3 of Nimmo, Canha, Alonso, McNeil could make sense to me. I know McNeil's not your traditional cleanup hitter, but I do really like him batting behind Alonso unless he's going to bat in front of him in the 2 or the 3 hole. So the Mets, as I said, you had the walk by Nimmo, Canha got the hit. Lindor struck out. Pete Alonso got hit by a pitch, so the bases were juiced for Jeff McNeil. And as he's done all season, got the job done, dumping one into right field to drive in 2. The Mets end up putting up a 4 spot in the bottom of the 5th to really stretch out their lead. Mark Canha had drawn a walk. Francisco Lindor got a hit, or was hit, excuse me. And then Pete Alonso ripped an RBI single to score Canha. Then Jeff McNeil was able to reload the bases by getting another hit. He now has 14 multi-hit games in 38 starts. Feels like every other game he's doing that, but just continuing just a great start to the season from McNeil. And then the two guys in this lineup who have been getting a lot of ire from fans ended up coming through in this spot. Eduardo Escobar with a sacrifice fly and Dominic Smith with an RBI single. Then my favorite run scored of the game, a guy that we're going to talk about in the final segment today, Luis Guillorme comes up and he lays down the absolute perfect drag bunt for a squeeze play to bring home McNeil. It does not get any more perfect when it comes to form and everything else from Guillorme on that bunt. I just love everything he does for this team defensively, giving you great at bats. Again, we're going to talk more about him in a minute, but he also got a rally going in the eighth, leading things off with a single against a lefty. Then Brandon Nimmo, the Mets' best hitter against left-handed pitching this year, somehow. I shouldn't say somehow as if it's a knock to Nimmo, but just more the fact that you would think it'd be someone like a Pete Alonso or a JD Davis or one of those right-handed mashers or a Marte or a Canna. But no, it's the lefty that's the best hitter on this team right now, Brandon Nimmo. And he ripped a triple that scored. It was Jankowski who pinch ran for Guillorme. That scored the first run of that eighth. Mark Canna then drove in Nimmo. Lindor then walked, and Pete Alonso put the cherry on top of the game with a 3-run homer. He's had so many balls die due to the dead-end baseball at the warning track, and so it's good to see one finally cut through and make it into the seats as he was able to increase his RBI total to 33 with a 4 RBI day. That ties him with Jose Ramirez for the MLB lead right now. So that was the day for the Mets. You score 11 runs, you're going to win a lot of games, and this offense needs to continue to fire on all cylinders if they're going to get through what could be a rough couple of weeks here where Bassett becomes your ace and you got Carrasco and a hell of a lot of question marks potentially behind them in that starting rotation. But one question that I have is what do we got to do to get Luis Guillorme in the lineup every single day? If you've listened to this show, I've been talking about it probably since 2019, or maybe not 2019, because 2019 he struggled at the beginning and then found his footing in August. Since 2020, I have certainly been talking about Guillorme in the starting lineup, and I'll give you some stats why he really should be getting more playing time in just a minute. But first, our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find out the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs and the Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends of the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, whenever I talk about Luis Guillorme, I always reference that he got called back up to the Mets in 2019. He had been sent down, had a really good year in Syracuse, started to figure things out, gets called up in August, and since then, he's been giving the Mets nothing but quality at bat. So I want to look back and find out the exact date where he turned things around. And it was August 5th, 2019, where he was reinserted back onto the roster, was in the starting lineup. And since then, over a sample size that spans over 300 plate appearances, this guy's hitting 283, 385 on base, 373 slugging. His walk rate is 14.2%. His strikeout rate is just 17.2%. And then his WRC plus is 118. Again, WRC plus measures hitters based on a league average of 100. So a 118 WRC plus is 18% better than your league average hitter. This is a stat that just came to my head that I know the Lindor detractors are going to love. For the most part, I'm not exactly sure what the update is, but Francisco Lindor's career WRC plus has been like 117, 118. So when you get on base at a 383 clip, you're a pretty valuable player. Now, Guillorme is not like Lindor, where he doesn't have the home run pop to get you 30 bombs in a season, but he can be an extraordinarily functional piece in your lineup. And only Brandon Nimmo has gotten on base at a higher clip than Guillorme since August 5th of 2019. That 385 on base percentage is extremely impressive. And you look at the breakdown since then, 2020 hit 333, but it was a 68 plate appearance sample size, 426 on base percentage, a 439 slugging percentage. He had a 145 WRC plus that season. Last year, unfortunately, dealt with so many injuries, a 265 average, 374 on base, 311 slugging. That was at 99 WRC plus, so about league average, but he walked at a 14.7% 14.8% clip and struck out at an identical 14.7% clip. Last year, Jonathan VR was a big story on this podcast. If you remember, I hated the signing. I mocked him early in the year, saying he only picked up stats in games that were blowouts on either side. He was a garbage time player, as I think I described him. And he made me eat my words, and I had to buy a Jonathan VR jersey. But if you really want to understand the entire VR saga, it all came down to Guillorme. I was always saying that I hated the VR signing because it would take away playing time from Luis Guillorme, who I felt like was a much better player. Now we're seeing it, and I think we finally have um, a season where this guy can thrive, particularly because his manager is someone that I think really appreciates this type of a throwback player that's giving him good defense, that can lay down a bunt like we saw today to drive in a run in a big spot, that gets on base to lead off innings and lead off rallies by getting that hit against the lefty. And you look at what he's done this season, coming into the day, his WRC plus is 130, so 30% better than your league average hitter. On the season, after picking up the hit today, 1 for 3 day, 278 average, 371 on base, 389 slugging, a 760 OPS. You look at the Mets lineup right now, outside of Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, and Mark Canha, that's the fourth or the fifth highest OPS on this team. Over the last 15 days, which is 8 games played for Guillorme, he's hitting 333, 364 on base, 476 slugging, and 840 OPS. The bottom line to me is, especially right now, until you get Starling Marte back, there's no question he's going to be in the starting lineup playing second base with McNeil and left. But even after that, I honestly am at this point where unless we suddenly see a Dom Smith or a JD Davis breakout, unless the Mets decide to go into the minor leagues and get a Nick Plummer up and give him some run, or they want to eventually call up a Mark Vientos, or if they make a trade, until any of that happens, I think that this Mets team is simply better with Luis Guillorme as their starting third baseman, Jeff McNeil at second, and your normal outfield. And Eduardo Escobar will still get his starts. The way Buck Showalter mixes things up, it's never going to be a set starting 9 every single day. So everyone's going to get their time. But to me, Guillorme deserves more playing time than an Escobar at the moment. He deserves more playing time in certain respects than obviously a Don Smith or a JD Davis, certainly. I mean, and even I like him at times more than like a Mark Canha, which is kind of crazy because Canha is starting to figure it out again. But I just, to me, he's someone in my personal pecking order that I just think he helps you win games. And maybe I'm talking about him too much. I don't know. I feel like at times I don't talk about him enough, which some of you are probably thinking is crazy. But this is a guy who just continues to prove himself, and I think with more opportunities, he's going to yield even more results. And I just love the idea, especially if you're talking about a team now, also that is going to have less strikeout pitchers available if Scherzer goes down. If you are going more Trevor Williams and David Peterson and these other guys are going to pitch to contact, have an elite defensive infield with Guillorme at third and McNeil at second and Lindor at short. Make this team as elite as you can defensively, because that'll help pick up the pitching a little bit as well. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, of course, we're going to react to whatever the Scherzer news is. The final game of this series with Chris Bassett on the mound. Also, I have Tom Hackemer on the show, a Mets pitching prospect who is currently rehabbing from Tommy John surgery, and he's sharing his story on his YouTube channel. So I brought him on to give our audience a taste of what he's going through right now, and also to kind of direct you over to some really interesting content he has going on out there, because he's giving you a behind the scenes look at something that we don't really get to see often with these pitchers, and this long process that they have to go through when they do have to go under the knife for Tommy John. So make sure you tune in for that. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB. I'm on today. So if you want more of me, you can check out that with Paul Francis Sullivan, but we call him Sully. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball. And again, today, you can hear more about the Mets. So why wouldn't you tune in?